Okay, in this lesson here, we're going to pick up from our last lesson where we were taking a look at event tables. But now we're going to make it a little bit more interesting. We're going to start looking at dynamic events. Now, if you remember in the last lesson, one of the things we showed you how to do was to set up an event table. And here you go with our begin and end event table and the various event handling that we've set up so that when you click on a button, we're going to call a specific function, and the function takes care of doing whatever functionality was required by the user doing its thing. So that's all good,
that's
fine,
all cool
and dandy. But now what happens if you need at runtime to change the function that gets called when
a certain event happens, right?
Right. So maybe I won't, under a certain condition, one event to get called if I press this button, but if that condition changes, I want a different event to get called.
Exactly.
So now the event table, if you will, needs to be kind of dynamic.
Right, it's static right now.
Yeah, it's very static. So this gets us into the world of dynamic events, which are really cool. So in this lesson, we're going to start out real simple. In the constructor for mainframe, what we're going to do is a dynamic event for, let's say, the list box.
Right.
So how about when you click on the list box, it figures out which one you've just clicked on, and it pops up a little message box that says, hello, this is what I just clicked on. It just gives the name.
Right.
Okay. But then...
But, and something just to throw out there extra,
sure.
One thing that you should be aware of when we do this list box thing, we can easily have done this exact same thing with an event table.
In fact, that's where you would really
want to do it.
But then after doing that, just to give you an idea of what it is, plus it also gives you an idea of working with list box just a little bit more.
Yep.
Then what I want to do is, how about we go ahead and add a checkbox in there?
Right.
And then we modify the add button so that when you click add, you know it's going to add something to the list box. But depending on if the checkbox is checked or not checked, it's going to add to rather the beginning of the list box or to the end of the list box. And I want the adding to be handled through two different functions so that at runtime it's going to dynamically determine which function needs to be called based on the state of the checkbox. So this will give you a better understanding of how dynamic events work.
Right.
Or dynamic event handling. Which
as a whole,
really cool stuff. Yeah, as a whole.
So the first thing, let's go ahead and connect a certain event generated by the list box to a certain function.
Okay.
So we use the connect function, which is a member of WXFrame, and we'll connect it to, okay, so we need an ID.
Right.
The first item is an ID, and our list box currently has -1.
-1, so we can't identify it, so back to the enum.
So we can call this maybe list items, because it has items in it.
In it.
And come back here, make sure that the list box has list items in it.
Now we can easily identify it, and this is who we're connecting to.
And now what we need to do is call which event. Now up here we've been using EVT_menu. Now we need to define what event we're looking for here, which is a little bit different. Here we're going to use WX EVT_command_listbox_selected.
Right, and while that might look quite scary at first, it's really not that bad. Let's take a look at this.
It's really just because I'm an excellent programmer.
That's right. Now, be quiet. Open up the help file. Let's take a look at this there, because it's really easy to see how this is done.
If we go to the contents and just search for WX command event, come in here, you can see that these event table macros, all of these on the left here represent the macros that we've been using in the event table.
In the event table, right.
On the right, you see that it processes a certain event. So like in the case of the button, it's WX EVT command_button_clicked. In this case, we have the event listbox processes a WX EVT command_listbox selected command.
So since we're not doing it in an event table, we can just jump right into
and capture that event.
That's it.
So let's go back to here with that already selected. Now what we need to do is pass it the function that we actually want to call. So let's go ahead and first define this in our header file. Come over to here and let's create, say, onSelected. And just like with our other events, this will be a command event, and we'll pass it event.
Go ahead and fix your capitalization. Thank you.
And come back. Sorry, I'm a little bit fast there. And come back to here, and we want to just pass it void, and mainframe, and then onSelected right here. And then we're going to pass it on WX command event. Just looks a little bit better. And inside of here, we're
Did you finish everything up
no,
in the constructor?
not yet.
Let's go ahead and come back down to this in a second. Let's go ahead and finish that up.
So we can come over to here, and all we need to do is pass that function. However, the connect function is looking for a WX object event function. Now, this isn't exact. It's a void main on selected.
Unselected, yeah.
It's something different. So what we need to do is cast it so that it considers it what it's looking for.
Right, and this concept right here may be a little bit difficult to those out there that are completely new.
Right, but it's basically, if you think of, I want to convert a float into an integer, it's the same idea.
Right, right.
It's just on a class basis. So event function. So we're casting it, and then we want to pass the reference to, well, the pointer to mainframe : onSelected. And yeah, we don't need those. And then just end it off. So that's all there is to it.
So that's going to handle getting us down there. And may I, before we leave that area,
Sure.
let me just go ahead and say this. This is really important to understand. Right now we're inside the constructor, and we're just simply saying that when you click on something in this list box, call this function.
Yep.
So it's very static at the moment.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
This would have been much better served if set up in the event table.
Right. It doesn't show the power of dynamic event handling at all.
And so we just want to point that out to you guys, so right away you don't go, oh, this is pretty cool, because you could come in here in the constructor and define all of your event table up here. You could have done them all this way.
That's
right here. But you'll notice, I mean, there's the casting, there's extra steps that were involved here.
Right.
And it just kind of makes it...
It's more cluttered in the end.
Yeah, it's more cluttered. It's less clean.
So I've seen some people, and this is not wrong, this is just a different way to do it. Some people declare, they go frame connect here and connect all the events inside of this function here, which is okay. It's just a different way to do it.
Yeah, it's just a different way. Event tables are very nice.
Yeah.
They're very easy, straightforward.
Yep.
Easy to read.
And that's what I like.
And readability is important.
Yes,
actually.
very much so, especially when you get big projects.
So now that we've got it set up so that when you do indeed click on something in the list box, it's going to call onSelected. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we make it find out what you've just clicked on and display the caption of the selected item.
Right, so basically what we'd be doing is calling message box, right? So we'd say message box, but the first thing it's looking for is the message, and we want it to be the caption of the currently selected item. So as I was saying before, we have more utility functions.
Yeah, remember, WX Widgets does a lot more than just GUI stuff.
That's right. It has file manipulation, string manipulation. It's great stuff. So we want to get the selected item. So we'll create a string called selected. And we'll just equate this to listbox. Remember, we stored the pointer to this guy. And there's a member function called getString. And all it, as one argument, that's the index to the currently the item that you want. So all we need to do is get the currently selected item.
We need to give it that index. So
we need to give it that index.
We've got to get that now.
And again, we can use a member function inside of the list box called getSelection. And this just returns the ID of the currently selected item, which is perfect.
Which then we turn right around and use the getString.
Exactly. So now we have selected. This is the easy part.
Populate it with whatever selected, and yeah, there you go.
And let's just pass it, I don't know, selected item.
Yeah, sounds great.
I know, fancy, creative.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and build that. It shall work.
Shall it?
Yes.
I am impressed.
Aha, it should be. So let's run this guy. And check it out. Let's add nothing, and let's say 3DBuzz. I'm obsessed with 3DBuzz. And if we come over to nothing, click.
Nothing.
Come over to 3DBuzz.
Hey, 3DBuzz.
And the first one works as well. Hello. So
Very
everything
nice.
works great.
So you guys got a bonus in this lesson.
That's right.
You saw a little bit more of working with list boxes.
Which is cool.
Yes, absolutely. But now, Joel, the problem I have with this is it does not really show the power of working with dynamic events.
No, it doesn't.
So let's make this a little bit more dynamic. Like I said at the very beginning of this lesson, let's add a checkbox in here.
Right.
That says something like add to beginning or add to end, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
And based on how that's checked, this add button is going to change. Its functionality is going to change depending on that checkbox.
Right.
And it's going to change if we're going to add this text right here to the beginning or to the end of our list box.
Right. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, very, very cool.
So let's exit this out. And the first thing I'm going to do, just because it's kind of bothering me, is the text control has kind of a huge border around it, so let's just kind of get rid of that. And right before this, we want to add a checkbox. So, surprise, surprise, we're going to come in here and say WX checkbox. But again, we're going to need to use this checkbox.
We're going to need to be able to reference it.
Right, we're going to need to reference this.
Outside of just the moment that the object's created. So.
Exactly. So let's come over to here and put in our private member data items. And let's just call this check end list. Okay?
Sounds great.
So let's copy this guy and just come over here and create a new checkbox, a new WX checkbox. And as before, we're going to pass it main panel. We need an ID for this. So what we're going to do is come back over to here and add check end list and pass it this ID. And now we need to pass it the label for it. So we'll say end of list.
Okay.
So that means it's going to, well, let's make it a little bit more descriptive. Add to end of list. Make it dummy proof. And we don't need to specify the position because we have auto layouts selected. all we need to do is add this guy straight to here. So check end list. Now, before we go ahead and add the events, let's go ahead and check it so you can see that it's working.
There. Yeah.
It's always good to work in steps.
And it is a control, meaning it needs to have its own event handling for when you click on the checkbox.
That's right. So we want something to happen when this is checked or unchecked, etc.
And that's an ideal place to take care of reconnecting the functionality that's going to occur when the add button's pressed.
That's right. So we can come up to the event table. We're going to use the event table first, and we'll say event checkbox. And what did I call the event? Check end list. Just put that in here. And we want it to call, say, mainframe on selection change. Okay?
Okay.
And I'm just going to create this function. So we come over to here and actually create this void function. Void. I could have copied, but again, I like typing. And then we can copy this function here and just create it. Now, this is where all the magic happens, if you will. By default, the add...
Let's go ahead and add mainframe in real quick.
Oh, yes, thank you. Getting carried away. By default, if we go up here, you'll notice that the add button is directed to on add. Now, basically, we need two functions, add to the end and add to the beginning. So let's go ahead and go to the mainframe here and add two functions. Void add end, which adds it to the end, and we'll have, this is going to be an event handling function as well, so it needs all this extra stuff. And we have add beginning. Now, what we can do is by default call add end for this guy. So the add button by default calls add end.
That's right. See, you guys out there, think about this. How cool is this? Because actually, by default, you've got to
add beginning.
Add beginning, yeah. How cool is this? Because we're using the event table to define the functionality that's going to occur, the default functionality.
Right.
But then we're going to turn around and overwrite this in a sense by using dynamic event handling.
That's right. It's quite cool, really. In this case, it may be a simplified example.
It is a simplified example.
It's supposed to be.
But that's the idea.
That's right. So we can say on add end, and we want to add it to the end, so that's right. And let's just copy this again and say add beginning.
And we just put that as 0.
And then we'll be set. Now, here's where everything really happens, essentially. And it's not really that hard of a check either. This is when we actually go to check or uncheck the item. So this is called every time you change the selection.
Click on the checkbox.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we need to check, is check, did I call it end list? Yes, I did. Keep forgetting when I call things. If check end list is checked, so it's going to return true or false depending on whether or not it's checked. If it is checked, what do we want to do? We want it to append to the end of the list.
Right.
So
now we need to connect.
All right, so we call connect, and then what do we have? We have add button, because that's the ID for the button. And then we have to pass EVT command button clicked, as we saw just a second ago. And then we pass it which one we want to call. Well, in this case, since we want to add to the end, we need to call add end.
You say, as I saw a minute ago, let's bring the help back up real quick, because I was looking at the list box stuff. But go ahead and point it out. There you go.
Right here.
So yeah, so now the EVT underscore button when dealing with the event table, and then on the right-hand side, as Joel just highlight it when dealing with the dynamic events, just straight to that functionality.
Exactly. So we have that, and now we need to call the correct function. So again, we're going to need to cast it.
So it is checked, so yeah, we got to cast it.
Let's just put this on the next line. Kind of makes life easier. WX object event function, and then pass it the address of mainframe add end. And that's it. That's all we need to do. So, the other... Whoa, I don't want to do that. Otherwise, we're going to connect to the add beginning function. Looking good?
Dynamic functionality.
Dynamic functionality.
Did you take the whole... Never mind.
Okay.
I was thinking of something different.
Believe you.
Yep. Look at that.
No errors. So right now, we're supposed to, when we add nothing, supposed to add to the beginning. So if I say Joel, which is me, add it to the beginning. If we select this guy and we say Buzz, it adds it to the end.
There you go.
And we can uncheck it again and say John, and it'll add it to the beginning.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now have basic dynamic event handling.
Ooh, fancy.
Very fancy. So it's really not hard to do. I guess
No.
for those that are completely new to working with C++ and they're just kind of struggling through to quickly get up to this point, the only thing that may be kind of awkward is the fact that they're now actually casting something a little bit bigger than just an int or a float or something like that. But I mean, you're just making it all happy.
That's right.
Outside of that, it's easy to do. It does offer a great deal of control, for sure. A lot of flexibility, just for the simple fact that it's at runtime.
Yep.
You can reassign the function that's going to get called.
That's right.
Based on any type of condition that you set up. And you can't do that with an event table. Though with the event table, it's a real nice place to set up your defaults, if you would.
That's right.
So anyways, that's going to pretty much wrap up this lesson. I think it does a really good job, Joel, of demonstrating a simple approach towards dynamic event handling.
Yeah, definitely.
So with that, thanks a lot, guys.